Welcome to Rough Drafts, How God Writes His Love in Our Stories, a podcast that explores the faith journeys of our friends and neighbors in Burns, Tennessee. Everyone has a story to tell, and in this podcast, we'll hear powerful and inspiring stories of how God works in the ordinary lives of people like you and me. Our stories are unfinished and perfectly imperfect. They are just rough drafts, a glimpse of what is to come because God is still at work, writing plot twists, introducing new characters, and bringing good even from the most challenging circumstances. Join us as we see what God is up to in our stories. Here's your host, Matthew Hyatt.
Good morning, sunshines. You're here, you're listening. It's my voice in your car, your earpods. Try not to drive off the side of the road listening. You come back for another episode of Rough Drafts, and I'm so glad that you were willing to do that today. Today's guest is one of my ministry colleagues. He is an Air Force chaplain. He is a lot of things, but I don't know what else he's going to choose to tell you. He serves over at First Presbyterian in downtown Dickson, and also the sister church in Waverly. I was second-guessing myself to McEwen for a minute, but he'll tell you all about that and more. It's my friend, John Smith. Welcome.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So you serve in the Air Force.
I do. I'm a reserve chaplain.
And you claim your name is John Smith.
I do.
Are you, in fact, a spy?
Maybe. But if I told you the actual answer to that, we'd have to erase this podcast and I'd have to kill you.
I'm okay with one of those two things. But if you erase this podcast, it'll never exist anymore. So, man. There are many other cool things. Another cool thing about John is the brains behind a cool little thing in Dickson called Theology on Tap. Yeah. Tell us about that.
We decided that the best way to discuss hard topics is with alcohol.
You're getting me in trouble here already.
So
it's a minute and 30 seconds in, and you're trying to get me fired. You decided.
Yes, I decided, but then I thought, what would be even better is if we included a Church of Christ minister in our shenanigans, and you're the only one in town that'll talk to me. So you were on the docket, and we met our good friend Joshua Nobles, and so that then comes the long-standing joke of the town. What happens when a Church of Christ minister, a Presbyterian pastor, and a Anglican priest walk into a bar?
And the answer is Theology on Tap.
Theology on Tap.
Second Tuesday of the month at Boardable 615 on Main Street. It has been a really neat thing.
It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
So if I can speak this directly about it, there are two types of people in the crowd. Hardcore church people. Some of my elders come with me sometimes. That's pretty cool. Some of our older members, it's pretty cool to see out there. But also, a lot of times, about half the crowd are people who are churchless, but trying to navigate that space.
Yeah, and showing them what it looks like to have those conversations, that we can be on different sides of the issue, but still talk about it without anger, without vitriol, without hatred, and share a drink, you and your Dr. Pepper and me and my old fashioned.
That's right.
And
thank you for saving my job there. I appreciate that.
Walking away, still brothers, without having to part ways because we can't agree on something.
What all have we talked about so far?
We opened with aliens.
That wasn't weird at all.
No, not at all. But that was our opening night. We've done some fun stuff and we've done some deep stuff. We did war. That was one of our deeper ones. We did war. We did trivia. We've done carols and cocktails.
We did a night singing Christmas carols. Yes, that was a lot of fun.
That was so fun. So we need to revisit that one and just do beer and hymns or something like that.
Christmas in July, do the carols again.
Yes. Or just regular hymns. You Church of Christ people know how to sing a cappella.
Yeah, that's our favorite.
Yeah.
That's us. We did AI.
We did do AI. I'd forgotten about that one. And now even though I've left it there and I haven't picked it up yet, we have our box. So that people can put in questions. And when we have a month where nothing's really hitting us hard, we'll have a box on hand and we'll just draw from it and tackle questions from people in the community.
So last one we did was what happens when you die.
That was pretty deep too.
Yeah, it was cool. And what's neat about that question, the answers didn't fall on like denominational or political lines. Like they were all over the place, and hearing how people got where they got, and hearing how Scripture, so and so thinks this Scripture means this, but so and so thinks this Scripture means that, and
yeah, that's one of those topics where it's not really something that there's so many answers, and I think each of our answers are personal enough that it matters, but it's also one of those things where we kind of all realize that there's not clear cut answers. Yeah. So I'm perfectly fine letting you have your version of it, as long as I can have my drinking and my all out partying.
So basically what you said is I can have heaven and you can have the bar. Okay, that's cool. I'm glad we've settled that.
I wonder which one Jesus will be at.
Oh, there you go. So if you haven't met John, you are getting the full dose today. This is good. But it really is neat. And I like the strategy at that first, the first one when we did it, we talked about aliens. And one of the reasons we did that was it was weird. And it's not the hot button issue that churches are splitting over.
Yeah.
So we got to kind of practice.
And next month is going to be one of our heavier ones. We try to keep them. We try to alternate. We don't want to go heavy every time because nobody wants to do that, right? Yeah. We want some levity, but we also want to make sure that we're showing that we're not scared of the heaviness. So next month we're going to be talking about what does unity look like and why is it so hard to work for?
Yeah.
I think that was your idea.
Yeah, because, we talk about it a lot, but we don't really know what to do about it. And, one thing that's tough is if somebody has a matter of conviction, even if it's not the most important issue in the world, that thing can become a barrier unless we find some ways to work around barriers.
Yep. Yeah. And so I'm looking forward to next month.
Yeah. Second Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, boardable 615. It's free. You can have Dr. Pepper with me, or you can be a heathen with John.
They make good drinks.
The Dr. Peppers are great.
And if you need to, if you can't drive afterward, we'll go down to my church and have an after party until you're able to drive home.
That's right. Well, so this was not the purpose of the conversation today, but I thought it was something I wanted to make sure our listeners got to hear about. I asked you here because I was hoping you'd tell me a little bit of your God story.
Yeah, of course. I think some of it came out at Christmas time, even for my own church, because it's one of those things where I don't go around. Presbyterians, we don't testify a whole lot.
Neither do we.
Okay.
And that's actually one of the reasons for this podcast, because I'll be honest, sometimes some of the churches that do a lot of testimonials, I think there's an excess that's a little unhealthy, and sometimes there can be testimonial envy and, who has the biggest, baddest story, and there's a certain type of story.
Yeah.
But I do think the concept of sharing a story is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it can be engaged. So I thought the podcast thing would be a neat way to do that.
I like that. And so I hadn't really shared much of my story even with my church, but then I put out for Christmas for my newsletter, I wrote my article was titled my Christmas in Rehab, or my Rehab Christmas, something like that. And so then it came out that Pastor John has a past, because they see me up front on Sunday morning and they see robed and put together, at least partially put together.
Yeah.
And it's harder to picture somebody with a past, but we all have one.
Yeah.
And
one of the least healthy things our churches do is put clergy on the pedestal and act as if we are not human.
Exactly.
That's not okay. It's not helpful. It's harmful. It's harmful to us as ministers.
Yep.
It's harmful to my children, and it's harmful to the church's spiritual development. I want people to hear it. This is bad.
Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't do anybody any favor.
No. All you do is set us up for failure.
Yes. And so being able to share this part of me was helpful for my church, because all of a sudden they began to see another facet of me. And there's power in vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's power in being vulnerable. And I think Paul is the one that says, it's strength and weakness.
Mm-hmm. 2 Corinthians.
Yeah. So my story, I was not raised in the church. My uncles sometimes took us to VBS or to Wednesday night programming, but we were never raised in it. My parents didn't deny God existed, but it was just not something that was put in our house. And so I was driven from a little age, like, to be the best at everything. And best grades in school, anything I went out for, I won. Like, that was my drive. It was when I was a teenager, and I had a little bit of a rebellious streak. Nothing crazy, but subtle letting off steam. Because when you get to that point where all you do is perfection, you have to have a way to not have perfection.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of subtle. And then one of my friends invited me. I don't know if you've ever been to a Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames rally.
I've heard of them.
Yes. So if you've never been, a description would be this. It's a play, and it is set around various scenes. And you have every scene starts and ends the same way. Something's going on, everybody dies. But before everybody dies, there's some kind of do you accept Jesus moment.
Yeah.
And then after they die, they go. And based on that decision, they get to go up and hug Jesus, or they get drug off to the left side of the screen, screaming by the demons.
Yeah.
And so I watched this as a 17-year-old kid, and without a fully developed frontal lobe.
Yeah.
And I'm like terrified, right? And so I'm like, I don't want that. I'm not really sure I want to hug Jesus either, but it's better than...
It sounds better than the screaming.
It sounds better than the screaming. Yeah. So where's the card? Where do I sign my name?
Yeah.
Give you my address.
Put me in.
Yeah, put me in. Put me on your mailing list. We'll do this. And so that was where it started. And so it really started from a place of fear, but it developed over time. Like, I began to take it seriously. Now here's the weird thing. The piece of fear never left. Okay. Like, not at the beginning. So that was always my early days in Christianity. There was always just this element of fear, of seeing God as finicky and just as able to send me to the place of screaming torment as welcoming me into his embrace. And so going back to what I said about the perfection thing, there's that drive to be perfect. There's that drive to be perfect. And anytime there's that drive to be perfect, there's also this need to let off some steam. Mm-hmm. And so it was, I was, after that, I head dove into church just as I had dove into everything. Yeah. And
what kind of church did you dive into from there?
Assemblies of God.
Okay.
Assemblies of God is where
they originated Heaven's Gates and Hell Flames, didn't they?
I don't know. It doesn't surprise me. It would not surprise me.
I'm not
if
sure
it
about
was,
that.
And the thing is, Assemblies of God tends to be congregational, so it could have come out of a Assemblies of God congregation, but not be an Assemblies of God program.
Production or whatever, yeah.
Yes. And so I was called into the ministry in one of their revivals, and decided where I was going to go to undergrad, went to an Assembly of God undergrad. And that's where everything kind of began to change.
Okay.
Because going back to that whole idea, like, there's always this incessant side of me that strives for perfection. Mm-hmm. Like, the need to be the best at anything I do.
Yeah.
including like God's favorite child. Like, yeah, I'm going to be God's favorite child because that's the thing, right? And that only holds up so well,
right?
Because it's not possible.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting, yes. And so one of the first lessons I learned when I got to college and got some freedom, because, you know, I'm an adult now, right?
Yeah.
And nobody's like watching my comings and my goings. At least I was at a religious college, so they kind of were, but they kind of weren't too.
Right.
I learned that I am really good at duplicity.
Okay.
Like, I'm really good at having John, who is all in and leading the Bible studies and you know, going to chapel and getting the best grades in my Bible classes and on the dean's list, that kind of John. And then figuring out how to develop a second friends group outside of all of that, where I can involve myself in trouble and not the good kind.
Yeah.
And so I developed this while I was in college.
Yeah.
And it did not take very long for me to find my way into substance abuse and some addiction. And, but was also really good at just kind of keeping that to
that stayed on that side.
Yeah.
The other stayed on the other side.
Yeah. Built a wall straight down the middle. And the two individuals just did not meet.
Yeah.
And I made it through college that way. And I got out of college and I took a small church. I was preparing for the ministry. Took a small church in Salem, Missouri. And over time, that wall began to crack.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder to maintain that thing over.
You can't do it forever.
You can't do it forever. And part of it's the Spirit's working, right? Like,
right.
Part of it's the Spirit's working. And that's what, you know, looking back, it's hindsight. Hindsight's always better to see these things through. And part of it is, despite my really bad misunderstanding of how God operates and that component of fear, which was such a big part of my faith journey at the beginning. Despite all of that, despite my misunderstanding of God, that shaky ground that I started this journey on, I was still God's. Like, God had called me and God had claimed me and God had said, "You're mine."
Yeah.
And so, you know, you're doing this stuff and it's really bad for you, but I'm going to help you to see what it really means to love me and what it really means for me to love you. And so that wall just gets chipped away. And eventually everything just comes crashing down. I remember meeting with my elders at the church I was serving, and I'm like, guys, I can't do this anymore. I'd called a minister. I tried so hard to be able to get help without telling them.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't, in my mind, I couldn't bear showing this weakness.
Fear of shame.
Yes. And so when I finally meet with them and I come clean, and I remember these elders, men and women, just hugging on me and saying, "We're going to get you the help that you need, Pastor." And that's when I took a sabbatical from my first church and went into rehab to get the help that I needed to be able to fully break down that wall. You know, I think of the verse, one of my favorite verses, one that has kind of guided me through all that process, was in 1 John. Perfect love casts out fear. Mm-hmm. And there was so much fear. There was so much fear in my relationship with God. Fear of that I would not be perfect. Fear that I would somehow still end up getting cast into hell.
Yeah.
And it was God's love in particular, it was God's love expressed through the people of the church that broke down that wall that I had built up.
Yeah.
And cast out that fear. That's the only thing that does it. And it was those moments that enabled me to face the shame, to face my addiction.
Yeah.
And be able to begin. I mean, and this, Matt, this was, I came to Christ, for lack of a better term, when I was 17, and it was 7 years before I finally figured out how to relate to God without being terrified. That somehow I was going to piss him off and everything was just going to come crashing down.
One of my key verses is 2 Timothy 1:7. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and sound mind or self-control. And to me, that verse is so important. And this is our 60-something podcast. And it is amazing to me. I would say at least half of the people tell a story of when I began my faith journey, I was terrified of God. And that might have gotten me started, but it sure set me up to have a fall. My growth began when it quit being about I was afraid of God. Yeah.
And that's so true. I mean, that's like so much of my story was the adventure really took off when I stopped being so scared of a God who loved me as much as God loves me. You know, like it's almost like God standing there saying, "What are you doing? Like, you know, stop being scared of me. Let me love you." And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, I don't trust that. You know,
and it's amazing how often, our fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Our fear makes us more likely to do the things that cause the harm.
Yes.
Our fear doesn't keep us safe. We think our fear keeps us safe. But, you know, when you're white-knuckling driving the car, you're more likely to do something that hurts you.
Yeah. And, you know, I learned something actually this week, surprisingly, about fear from a different class I'm leading at my church. But fear, the way that fear works in the brain, it actually shuts down other neurological processes.
You get dumber.
You do. It shuts off your ability to imagine and to innovate. And so when we're operating from that place of fear, we can't really imagine what amazing things God has in store for us. Yeah. We begin to think of things dualistically. Yeah. Heaven, hell, reward, punishment.
In, out.
Yeah.
You know, black and white. And I wish I could get the church to think more in terms of wisdom, because so much of life is not in that. I mean, yeah, there's right and there's wrong. Absolutely. But there's so much of, is this a wise decision? Yeah. That is a better question, I think. One thing that I think is difficult for us, and let's play theology for a second before we get back to your story. You know, there's some Bible that I think we have to reckon with. You know, fear God, keep his commandments. This is man's all, right? The fear of the living God, God's holiness. God is a and this is probably in my head because you're sitting in front of my books of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But there's that line in there about Aslan is not a tame lion.
Right.
Is he safe? Oh, no. You know, but he's good.
He's good.
So, like, I want to find a way to talk about God in such a way that people have reverence and respect for his otherness and his greatness, but not terror at the thought of him.
Right. And that it's, man, that's such a hard thing because God is always other. Even Jesus, God with us, he's still the God who still storms, right? Yeah. And walks on water.
The disciples were afraid of him so many times.
Yes. And so there's still the otherness of God. And so God's not my buddy.
Yeah.
God's my God. but I can relate to God from a place of understanding his goodness.
He loves us.
He loves us, and still recognize the fact that this God is holy and very different from me.
Yeah.
But like, he wants to be with me. Like, he wants to have that relationship with me. And there's no way. That's one of those things, and this may sound like a cop-out, but it's one of those things that you can't know, but you just have to experience.
I mean, the Bible talks about the peace that passes understanding.
Yeah.
And we dumb preacher types will preach a sermon called Understanding the Peace That Passes Understanding, and not realize what we're doing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is really hard, if you are not a Christ follower, I mean, no insult, no judgment, but I believe that at best you are peeking through the window at something. You can maybe smell the cookies from outside.
Yeah.
You can see the cookies, but you can't taste the cookies until you're in.
Yeah.
And that's the work of the Holy Spirit. I mean, the fruit of the Spirit is the Spirit's fruit, not the Christian's to-do list.
Yep. You sound like Presbyterian.
Well, I grew up being told how wrong Calvinists were. And then I found out Calvinists didn't think all the things I was told Calvinists thought. So I call myself a Calvinian.
There you go. There you go.
So it's my Arminian and Calvinist, it's my mix. And I like Calvin and Hobbes, so I have to like John Calvin.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know. I think there's just something really important there to dig into. So So back to your story. You are surrounded by your church. They launch you into this experience of going to rehab.
Yeah. And man, rehab. Think of the most uncomfortable conversations you can ever have, and then ratchet it up like 50.
Yeah.
And you don't even get to go home from it, because I was in a residential program. Okay. So for 3 months, not even one of the 28-day sober programs. Like, this is 3 months. Like, I'm committing myself for 3 months to this process. And it was so painful, because they didn't let me have my wall that I had become so comfortable hiding behind. And they weren't even content, like, pecking at it to bring it down. Like,
they came in like a wrecking ball.
Yes, like a wrecking ball. They just like tore the thing down. And, you're just, all of this stuff is just coming up. Like, all of my insecurities, all of my drive for perfection, trauma, like, things that nobody wants to deal with. Like, not even the perfectionist, like, none of us want to deal with this stuff that's inside. And there were so many nights that I laid there in bed and thought to myself, I could run from this. I could run from this. They don't lock you in. Like, like we lived in a house, and
you can walk out.
Yeah, you can walk out at any time. And I was like, I was in Memphis, Tennessee. The church that I had served was in Salem, and they kind of the rehab place kind of cuts communication off from the outside world to a large degree.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, my mid-20s mind, frontal lobe still not fully developed yet, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, if I just want to disappear, this is the time to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I could run. I don't have to tell the church. I don't even have to tell my parents. I can just, I am a state away. I can just disappear.
I can start a new life and nobody will ever know.
Yep. And so, like, it was brutal, but it was actually the remembering the love of those elders that kept me there, despite the pain.
Yeah.
And the stuff that I didn't want to deal with. The story I tell in my article is my Christmas story, because the season I go to rehab was Thanksgiving and Christmas. Like, so
the hardest time of year.
Yes, I missed Christmas with my family. I missed Thanksgiving with my family. But those experiences with those men in that program gave me such an appreciation for just the simplicity of the holidays. Because when you go through that stuff with others, there's a certain, you learn to relate to others on a whole new level when they start just seeing all of your gunk.
Yeah.
And still not like, I mean, they'll look at you and be like, yeah, that's messed up.
Yeah.
But then they'll be like, but here, hold my beer. Not literally in the case of a rehab.
Here's my mess up.
Here's my mess up, you know? So it's a relation that is really driven by shared weakness, shared vulnerability. And we help each other we gave space to people to feel their shame, but we refuse to let people sit in it.
I'm sorry, are you defining what the church is supposed to be, or are you talking about what rehab was?
As my rehab. I wish the church could figure that out.
Seriously.
I wish the church could figure that out.
You know, that's one reason I think that churches that have rehab programs tend to be healthier churches, because they have learned. I have a friend, Jerry Barber, always said, wouldn't it be cool if church was the place we could come together and tell the truth?
Yeah. And you know, that it was kind of funny, Matt, because when I got out of it first, so I go through it and then I get out and I'm healthier, right? You're healthier. But when I come out of rehab, I'm like terrified of everything, because you're re-stepping into the world and all you can see is like triggers. I was afraid to go to Walmart without somebody coming with me.
Yeah.
Because I was scared that I was going to mess this whole thing up and have to do 3 months all over again.
Yeah.
So, you come out very tender. But I had better footing, and I had some, they made me put some, didn't make me, but they helped me to design some protection.
Yeah.
When I got home, so that I had some safety nets. And, but I learned very quickly, that the church was not interested in the same level of vulnerability as the recovery community.
Yeah.
You know, the church is comfortable with vulnerability that's clean and that's neat and that doesn't really involve like,
I have sinned, it shall not happen again.
Yes. And you know, I love Presbyterians, we do a prayer of confession at the beginning of every service. And I like that. It's a good tradition. But that's our honesty is printed on paper and we recite it together. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
So what's that prayer? Is that one you have memorized?
Oh no, I change it up.
Okay,
I
varies
change
from
it up.
between.
Yeah. To month, but yeah, we change it up. But it's that moment where we confess our sins corporately, and it's good. It's a good practice. But there's not that sense of that level of just brutal.
Oh, my line is, you know, as a Protestants, we don't really like the method where Catholics confess their sins to a priest in the phone booth. Mm-hmm. But our alternative appears to be confess our sins to no one. Yes. And I'm not sure I think that's healthier.
No.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why, like, the recovery community is so important to those going through recovery. Because for those of us who do struggle with addiction and and are prone to it, we need to have people in our lives that we can be radically honest with.
Yeah.
And the church, this is not me like running from the church. I love the church, but the church is not that place more often than not. The church is not the place that allows for radical honesty.
And what if it were?
What if it were? Yes. That'd be good. Well, I think that would be good. That would be terrifying. That would be good and terrifying all at the same time.
I want to dream about us being that, because we're called to fellowship. Fellowship is not a potluck that you have once a quarter.
Right.
Fellowship is shared life.
Yes.
Bonhoeffer's life together is stunning. There's a reason so many Christians over the eons have begun some sort of monastic life, some sort of order together. But we're feeling pretty good if we can get our people to show up for an hour once a week, 3 weeks out of 5.
Yeah.
We are called to do life with others. And I don't think that I need to confess every sin of mine to every person in the church.
No, and we don't need those mediators. Like, we don't need mediators. God is fully welcoming and open and ready to receive us. But I think there's a balance, because God also calls us to community. God doesn't just do this, hey, it's just a me and Jesus thing.
Yeah.
He calls us to that honest community, and that's probably the hardest part of following Jesus. It isn't. We can say, yeah, I'll follow Jesus. That's fine. But when you learn that following Jesus means that you're following Jesus with these other people
whom you might not have picked,
and then following Jesus, you're like, well, I'll follow Jesus if I can follow Jesus over here with these people.
Yeah.
like I mean,
go that way.
Yeah. No, I mean, who knew I would be in my 40s following Jesus with a Church of Christ guy and Anglican priest?
Yeah.
But here we are.
Well, I mean, God answered your prayers to bring you to the righteous.
Maybe. That's yet to be seen. Or he answered your prayers.
one or the other. We're not, or maybe he's just sitting back shaking. You have this painting in your office that I love. It shows God looking down, and what does it say?
Disappointments, all of you.
But why I love that is because we don't believe. Well, it is true. We all have we have all sinned. We have all failed. But we know that's not how God has chosen to look at us, and that's the beauty of that piece of art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's...
How did that experience shape your continued ministry?
My rehab.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, and I can share my because it isn't even my success story, but one of the things that we did at First Pres. So one of the things that rehab, my experience in rehab did for me, is that it made me very open to the recovery community.
Yeah.
Because I see the value. I need it myself. Like, I need to be around these people.
Yeah.
Because just the beauty of the honesty, like, just the beauty of the honesty, the quickness to forgive.
Yeah.
Like, when we make a mistake, when we step back into our sin or whatever you want to call it, the recovery, there's no judgment.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a matter of how can we best help you get back on the track. And I was here First Pres, we didn't have any AA groups at the time, and I have a friend of mine who's at the church, and he came to me in 2021, and yes 2021. I was trying to think there because they just celebrated their 3rd year of creation.
Yeah.
And he asked me if he could start an AA group there. And I said, absolutely, man, let's do it. And so it was him and his sponsor on Tuesday nights. And they started this program. And for 3 months, it was him and his sponsor on Tuesday nights. And that's it.
Yeah.
And then...
most people don't make it to week 2 if that happens, much less week 13.
Yeah. And so then, and today, that same group now meets Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and they'll have anywhere between 40 and 60 people there 3 times a week.
That's crazy.
And so like, just one of the things that it did for me was I'm driven to go outward. Like don't get me wrong, I love the church. I love the saints that are put together and beautiful. But I love the saints that are just messes.
I find more honesty.
Yes.
So the thing I say about jail chaplaincy, you guys know I volunteer up there in the jail. When you go to church on Sunday and you say, how you doing? Everybody at church says they're fine.
They're great.
Now, whether or not they are, they lie. Or they don't want to let you in. When I go to jail, nobody says they're fine.
Yeah.
In fact, it's actually the opposite. Sometimes some of them make it out worse than it is. I mean, jail's not a fun place to be, but for some of them, it's actually the best place they've been in a while because they've been sleeping in crack houses and under a bridge. And I'm not saying that to be judgy. I'm saying that just to tell the truth.
That's how it is.
When I go to church, everybody pretends to be okay, but when I go to jail, nobody pretends to be okay. So I find jail refreshing.
It is. It is.
And you know, it's funny. The criticism I get, I'm sorry for this little rant. People say, well, you know, the problem with jail ministry is jailhouse religion. People find Jesus in jail and they leave him at the door when they leave. I said, that's great. But you know, that same thing happens at our church every Sunday.
Yeah.
People find him at church on Sunday, go home and leave him.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. And I don't know, like, and you know, coming from my thing is, it's when God finds those people, and we can pick God up and put God down all we want.
Yeah.
But God's there saying, hey, I'm not going nowhere.
Yeah.
I'm not going nowhere.
Not getting rid of me that easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that looking back over my life, there were so many times that if God was willing to set us aside, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Mm-hmm.
Because there any time, any moment, God could have been like, God, this guy's a piece of work. Like, this guy's too much work. Yeah, we're gonna pass. We're gonna go over here.
No thanks. I'll take this one. He's easier.
Yeah, he's easier. But that's not how our God relates to us. Our God is like, he's work, but it's fun. You know.
It is really fun.
Yeah.
Well, John, man, this has been fun.
Yeah, it has.
I'm glad we did this.
Me too.
I'll make one more Theology on Tap thing.
Okay.
A month ago, our topic was why Christian, and we went around the room.
That's right.
And kind of did almost a live version of this.
Uh-huh.
What's your story? Why are you a Christian? And it was so neat to hear all of the different versions of, from my introduction to Jesus was Hell's Gates and Heaven's Flames, to I grew up in a house that went to church every time the doors were open and then some, to I was angry and then this. I mean, it's been pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's amazing what happens if you give somebody space to tell the story.
Yeah, it is. It is. And God uses that space. God uses that story to shape in others.
Yeah.
So,
anything else you want to share?
I'm good, man. I'm a preacher. I could talk all day. But
yeah, that is I've tried not to have ministers on here because I'm afraid that it'll go on and on and on and on. But, you know, there's some good stories that we have too, I guess.
Yes.
Man. Well, friends, thanks so much for listening today. I hope this has been a blessing to you, and I hope it's just been maybe a reminder for you of God's relentless love for us. He is in pursuit of his people. Always has been, always will be. And I think that's something maybe you needed to hear today. You know where to find us next time. We'll be back next Tuesday for the next victim at next story, next episode of Rough Drafts. Catch you then.
Thanks for listening to Rough Drafts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. While you are at it, help us spread the word by leaving a rating and review. Until next time, let's keep looking for how God writes his love into our stories.